Welcome to another edition of Language of the Gods, where we discuss issues and topics relating to metaphysics, astrology, and astrotheology. Here we delve into the dark recesses of hidden knowledge in an attempt to draw out the truth which has been suppressed and distorted by a sinister hidden hand over centuries of control and manipulation, as they work together towards their ultimate objective of global governance under an all-encompassing technological control grid.
Why should we not form a secret society with but one object, the furtherance of the British Empire and the bringing of the whole uncivilized world under British rule, for the recovery of the United States, for the making the Anglo-Saxon race but one empire? What a dream! But yet it is probable, it is possible. Cecil Rhodes, 1853-1902. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Part of John F. Kennedy's speech, The Press Association, 1961. The Empire has and will use all options available to it. Nothing is off the table. If necessary, they will assassinate leaders, presidents, and monarchs, as long as the replacement runs favourable to their imperialistic aspirations. There is no greater mechanism for social change other than war. If the empire requires a war to bring about change, they will have a war, manipulating people and events to initiate it. Their eyes and ears are everywhere. All dissenters are filed and observed, and through secret societies, individuals are manoeuvred and coerced into performing sometimes illegal acts, designed to help the empire, while the individual believes naively they are advancing their own personal cause. During the latter half of the 19th century, collectivist movements and groups of socialists began to appear, forming organizations and societies, believing that human civilization can only survive and advance under a global collectivist system, a system which would be organized top-down by people like themselves. In this future world, the majority of the citizens have no rights. They are given privileges by their superiors, and they are only born to serve the greater good of the collective. There were two basic camps of collectivists, both with the same goals but with different approaches. The Marxists, a group of collectivist socialists who saw a fast revolutionary approach as the solution. This method was only suitable in countries where democracy was weak, where the people were already acclimatized to mild forms of dictatorships. The other camp preferred a slower approach, using propaganda, legislation, education, and media to bring a nation around to their way of thinking. They realized that in societies with strong participatory democracies, that they would have to infiltrate slowly, going unnoticed by the majority. This group are known as Fabians, a semi-secret society who use two symbols within their movement, a turtle and a wolf in sheep's clothing, named after the Roman general Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus, who became famous for avoiding direct military engagements, instead preferring wars of slow attrition. Fabianism or Fabian strategy has come to mean a gradual, slow, cautious policy. Both these groups work together to control world populations, aiming to bring about a unified global collectivist society. The Marxist-Leninist camp made great gains throughout the East, sponsored by the international financiers, using communism as an expression of their socialist collectivism, predominantly in the Soviet Union and China. The Fabians, on the other hand, had to be patient. They had to develop strong influences at all levels of government and society. Based in London, they nurtured many offshoots and socialist organizations which sprang up across the globe promoting collectivism. The Fabians are wolves in sheep's clothing, whereas Marxist-Leninists are wolves in wolves' clothes. Many prominent Labour Party politicians have been members of the Fabian Society, including Ramsay MacDonald, Clement Attlee, Tony Benn, Harold Wilson, Tony Blair, and Gordon Brown. Other famous Fabians include George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells, and Bertrand Russell. Collectivists see the state as the new God, the new emperor, the new religion. Your individuality must be moulded to fit within the parameters set out by the state. You must serve the state to justify your existence. Otherwise, you're an unworthy misfit or a homegrown terrorist, a threat to the legitimacy of statism and collectivism. Their new definition of extremist is anyone who challenges their established order, no matter how extreme it becomes. All subjects within the new social order must be restricted within a narrow band of conscious expression, revoking the natural biological reflection of endless universal possibilities, limiting freedom, liberty, and self-expression. To achieve their objectives, the collectivists have their members actively perverting media, politics, education, history, and science, with the aim of advancing their ideological cause, firmly believing that the final end justifies their deceptive moves and infiltrations. We are told that man is responsible for climate change. We are told who our new enemies are, those who we should fear and fight. We are told that we must give up our freedoms for security, give up our sovereignty for harmony. We are told that austerity is necessary, that there is no more money for our communities. But on the other hand, we see plenty of money for war. We are told to be vaccinated and that GMOs are safe. We are conditioned to accept the official version of events and not to question anything. Just keep on shopping, watching TV and eating, and eventually everything will be just fine. The problem associated with all variations of collectivism, whether it is communism, socialism, fascism, Nazism, or globalism, is that they all eventually resort to brute force to maintain power and to perpetuate themselves. David Rockefeller, an agent for the international financiers, expressed his admiration for the collectivist experiment in China under Chairman Mao. Fully aware that at least 45 million people had been worked, starved, or beaten to death in the process, Mao is probably the greatest mass murderer in history. Whatever the price of the Chinese Revolution, it has obviously succeeded, not only in producing more efficient and dedicated administration, but also in fostering a high morale and community purpose. The social experiment in China, under Chairman Mao's leadership, is one of the most important and successful in human history. David Rockefeller, New York Times, 1973. To the globalists, the human cost involved in the collectivist experiment is not an issue. This is why George Bush and Tony Blair can take their countries to war on lies. They are not interested in the truth or conflicting evidence. Their overall mission is to force through the next phase of globalisation. It is their job to make the next phase of the agenda plausible to the general public. They are just PR men for the controlling corporations. They would not have been allowed in office if their views or wishes ran contrary to globalisation. Since the fall of the Berlin Wall, the West has become more like the East, and the East has become more like the West, merging the two variations of collectivism towards unification. Once practical parity has been achieved sometime in the near future, a new level of global administration will emerge from some manufactured crisis, a new tier of bureaucracy, out of reach of most people whom it will control and supposedly represent. In 1948, another Fabian, George Bernard Shaw, wrote, "I am a communist, but not a member of the Communist Party. Stalin is a first-rate Fabian. I am one of the founders of Fabianism, and as such, very friendly to Russia." From Fabianism to Cecil Rhodes, most secret and semi-secret societies operate from a central core outwards. The inner ring or circle contains the bigwigs, the influential elite and trusted associates, who hold most of the cards and are setting the direction of policy. From this inner circle, a slightly larger ring or organisation is formed around them, attracting members who have no knowledge of the inner ring, its members or its influence. These outer ring members are carefully selected, who either have genuine aspirations parallel to the objectives of the inner core or are compromised through various techniques. This outer ring creates another outer ring, and so on, until it interacts and influences mainstream society. At the outside level, they pay for the services of innocent, naive people who perform various tasks, advancing the desires of the inner circle and controlling elite. Using this method, the wizard can remain anonymous behind the curtain, invisible to the casual observer, as he propels the old form of empire into a new form of collectivist global governance. The opposing camps of collectivism can use their differences within the theatre of geopolitics to play one off against the other, distracting and confusing the vast majority within the public realm, creating an excuse to mould each political and social system towards the final stage of globalisation. tax-exempt foundations. There are many tax-exempt foundations in the United States and the world who masquerade as charitable organizations, created from the private wealth of a few rich individuals. These philanthropic organizations are perceived by many as beneficial to society's progress. But what are their true intentions? And what are the trustees and policy makers really up to? In the early 1950s, the US Congress set up a special committee to investigate some of the most well-known tax-exempt foundations, including the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Endowment, the Rockefeller and Guggenheim Foundations. The Reese Committee asked Norman Dodd to form a team of investigators to look into the workings of these foundations. At that time, there was a suspicion of anti-American activities underlining their operations. During the early stages of the investigation, Mr. Dodd met with the then president of the Ford Foundation, Mr. H. Rowan Gaither. On their first meeting, Gaither admitted that the foundation's policymakers were under the influence of directives which came all the way from the White House. They were instructed to use their grant-making powers to aid a comfortable merger of everyday life in the United States with the lives of the people in the Soviet Union. This was an underlying objective, which was to be secretly done behind the scrutiny of the general public. Following this, Mr. Dodd met with the relatively new president of the Carnegie Endowment Foundation, Mr. Joseph E. Johnson, and his young staff. Due to the work involved answering all the questions posed by the investigation team, the president of the endowment offered all the minute books going back to the foundation's conception. Dodd's team had 2 weeks to plough through the material, looking for all the answers they needed. He appointed Catherine Casey, a bright lawyer with a balanced temperament. However, with limited time, they had to focus on specific time periods in order to uncover what they were ultimately looking for. In 1908, the topic of discussion within the minute books of the Carnegie Endowment was in the form of a recurring question. Is there any means known more effective than war, assuming you wish to alter the lives of an entire people? They concluded, the answer, no, there is no more effective means other than war known to alter the lives of an entire people. 1909, question. How do we involve the United States in a war? Answer. We must control the State Department. Question. How do we do that? Answer. We must take over and control the diplomatic machinery of this country. During World War I, the Carnegie Endowment recorded in their minute books a shocking transcript of a telegram dispatched to President Wilson, cautioning him to see that the war doesn't end too quickly. After the war was over, the endowment recorded their new objectives: to ensure the American way of life does not revert back to how it was before the war. In order to do that, they concluded that they must control the American educational system. They also concluded that the task was too big for them alone, so they asked for help from the Rockefeller Foundation, who accepted the challenge. Domestic education was to be handled by the Rockefeller Foundation, while international education was to be handled by the Carnegie Endowment. They concluded that the key to success lay in the teaching of American history, or at least their version of it. The foundation approached 4 of the most prominent history teachers of the day asking for assistance in their new plan of altering the manner in which American history was taught. Realizing the implications, the teachers turned them down flat. It left the foundation with no other choice but to build their own stable of historians and history teachers. Eventually, they had 20 new recruits who went on to become the nucleus of the American Historical Association. By the end of the 1920s, the Carnegie Endowment spent an enormous sum putting together a comprehensive study. They concluded that the future of America belongs to collectivism, administered with the characteristic of American efficiency. In the final report, Dodd's investigation concluded that tax-exempt foundations were working in harmony towards the control of education within the United States. Their overriding objective was to orientate the educational system away from supporting the principles embodied in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. On August the 19th, 1954, Carroll Reese, member of the House of Representatives, summed up his investigation headed by Norman Dodd. It has been said that the foundations are a power second only to that of the federal government itself. Perhaps the Congress should now admit that the foundations have become more powerful, in some areas at least, than the legislative branch of the government. This is a perfect example of how the controlling elite have been secretly manipulating the beliefs of the American population for nearly a century, a defined intent to bring the majority of the citizens within the constitutional republic closer towards a socialist collectivist globalisation project. On one hand, the citizens still believe they are free sovereigns in the greatest democratic republic in the world, while on the other hand, working feverishly to impose the will of a tiny group of influential men, hell-bent on creating a new world in their image, in line with their own personal arrogant beliefs, convinced that their version of the future is better in the long run for everyone else, with new foundations springing up and working together towards common goals, some which appear on the surface as humanitarian. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have a new motto, a call for global citizens. This motto aims to influence the global educational system into manufacturing favorability towards their corporate monopolistic sales and aspirations, socially engineering the fragile minds of this new generation, targeting them as early as possible. Man-made global warming or climate change has infested every nook and cranny within the student's learning experience. Persuasive suggestions have targeted their fragile minds from all directions within a new Common Core educational program, another belief system designed to maneuver humanity into a web of socialistic collectivism, ruled by international financiers and international corporations. The days of well-informed critical thinkers, a population of wise, logical and balanced reasoned men and women, are fast becoming extinct. The controllers do not want this in their ranks of the masses. They want obedience and compliance, a population progressively dumbed down enough to blindly accept all the latest government-issued concepts and smart enough to implement and force them on the rest of humanity. With full control over the educational system, the 21st century human commodity will slot nicely within the advancing global collectivist project, functioning in line with policy. Through education, vaccination and persuasion, Our new citizens are being groomed like stable horses to participate in the next phase of the Death Star's construction. The Bilderberg Group, conference, meeting or club has recently become a semi-secret private society, arranging annual conferences for approximately 150 influential political leaders, industrialists, financiers, academics, media moguls and elitists, with connections to the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the IMF, and many of the world's global and international organizations. They interact at the highest level to gather and share ideas and objectives, ensuring the globalisation project is focused and on track. During the conference and its many seminars, fresh plans can be put into motion. Attention will be highlighted by members and think tanks who feel it necessary to tweak and adjust policy to maintain their projected schedule. All necessary participants within these areas will be brought in line with new expectations. The group evolved its name from the hotel in Oosterbeek, Netherlands, where it held its first meeting in 1954. The list of attending participants to these meetings is quite staggering, no doubt a reflection of how important the event has become amongst the influential elite. The Bilderberg Group has now become a major cog in the global shadow government, interacting with many different established organizations, working together to create a new world socialist collective, a new feudalist system ensuring greater control and compliance towards a society aligning itself with the serious controlling and restrictive energies of Saturn. Skull and Bones is a secret society located within the grounds of Yale University, established in 1832 by William Huntington Russell. The university was founded by Eli Yale, a wealthy opium trader within the East India Company. Russell was also involved in the drug business. His successful shipping firm dominated the United States side of the Chinese opium trade. The Skull and Bones Secret Order became a recruiting ground to preserve power and commercial interests of prominent families in the area, connecting and profiting primarily from the opium business. Drugs in those days were not illegal. They acted as a mechanism of control and influence, addicting people from all walks of life, generating profit and political leverage for the seller, traders who cared not for the well-being of their victims, saw the world through the eyes of a psychopath, interested only in their own economical and political power. The opium trade eventually led to the Opium Wars, which brought about the British Empire's control over Hong Kong. Each year, the Skull and Bones Secret Society would select a mere 50 new recruits from their first-year students. In their final year, at Yale, they would become members of the order through an initiation ceremony. Each generation of elitist families would ensure their sons were chosen, keeping the power tight within the same circles. George W. Bush was a member along with his father and grandfather, a family name synonymous with bonesman. Being nominated a bonesman would certainly guarantee you a prominent position in the outside world, financial success in areas of politics, banking, law and commerce. It was bonesmen taking care of bonesmen. Considering only 15 new recruits are initiated each year, the number of bonesmen in top jobs is vastly disproportionate to the rest of the population. During the 2004 presidential campaign, the electorate were given two choices: George W. Bush or John Kerry, both members of Skull and Bones, swearing an oath of secrecy, opposing each other in public but united together in secret. Just like many other secret societies, being initiated takes one through an array of macabre occult rituals. The Skull and Bones is no different. It has been reported that while the initiate lays helpless in a coffin, he is flanked by one member dressed as the devil and another dressed as a hooded skeleton, chanting, "The hangman equals death, the devil equals death, and death equals death." In the temple itself there is a room they call the tomb, which houses numerous human skulls and bones presented in display cabinets, where an unhealthy fixation of death seems to be the overriding theme. There is a rumour that Prescott Bush, with fellow bonesmen, robbed the grave of the Apache chief Geronimo back in the early part of the 20th century. Furthermore, they took his skull and displayed it in a glass case within the tomb of their temple at Yale. Yale University and the Skull and Bones Secret Society has had some interesting involvements in Chinese politics, partially due to their participation within the country's active opium trade, with the exception of the Carter administration, 1976 to 1980. All United States ambassadors to Beijing since Henry Kissinger's deal with Mao in the early 70s have been members of the Skull and Bones Secret Society. This is quite a feat when you consider that only 15 are initiated each year. At the start of the 20th century, Yale Divinity School established a number of schools and hospitals throughout China, known as Yale in China. Perceived by many as another non-profit, philanthropic, charitable organization, it was designed to develop educational programs in China which would further relations and understanding between the Chinese and American people. It could also be seen as a front for altering their collective perception, influencing political change in the beliefs of the Chinese people. Writing in the Yale Daily News, Jonathan Spence, a professor of Chinese history at Yale University, reveals that Yale in China supported Mao Zedong's rise to power. In 1919, when Mao was 26, the Students' Union invited him to take over editorship of the Yale Journal. Mao accepted the position, where he quickly changed its format, promoting his own social criticisms and Marxist ideology. China was in the throes of great change. After the fall of the old imperialistic system, a new republic under Sun Yat-sen could see China competing against the West, economically and militarily. The Western elitists preferred a tough approach, one which would keep China in a perpetual state of backwardness, a command and control structure which was simple and authoritarian, keeping a boot firmly stamping on China's progress for decades. Mao's Communist Party could do just that. Once Mao was in full control, he turned China into the world's largest opium producer. Bohemian Grove is a large forested area in Northern California, where a 140-year-old private San Francisco men's art club holds a 2-week encampment for its members and their guests, which includes some of the world's most powerful men. Senior members of the Grove, with over 40 years' service, are elevated to the prestigious position and status of Old Guard. which gives them priority treatment and VIP seating at seminars and ceremonies. The Bohemian Grove's mascot is an owl, a 30-foot concrete statue standing centre stage at the head of the lake in the grove. The owl is said to be a symbol of wisdom. At the start of the event, a ceremony called Cremation of Care is performed in front of the 30-foot owl. A mock human sacrifice, along with its burning, takes place in front of a large audience by a selection of robed members purporting to be exorcising demons with the intention of ensuring the success of the ensuing 2 weeks. This whole ceremony has a definite ancient occultist overtone. The Bohemian Club has a patron saint, John of Nepomuk, similar to Freemasonry and the story of Hiram Abiff. Their saint suffered death rather than disclose closely guarded secrets, reminding members of their expected cooperation. Democracy must be built through open societies that share information. Where there is information, there is enlightenment. Where there is debate, there are solutions. When there is no sharing of power, no rule of law, no accountability, there is abuse, corruption, subjugation, and indignation. Atifete Jahaga, President of Kosovo. There is nothing so despicable as a secret society that is based upon religious prejudice and that will attempt to defeat a man because of his religious beliefs. Such a society is like a cockroach. It thrives in the dark. So do those who combine for such an end. William H. Taft, the 27th President of the United States. The Council on Foreign Relations, founded after the Great War in 1921. The CFR purports itself to be an independent, non-partisan membership organisation, think tank and publisher. It currently has 4,900 members from the highest levels of government, business, finance and media. Its main goal is to influence politics, foreign policy and international economics towards the consolidation of power, promoting globalisation, free trade agreements and reducing financial regulation for the transnational corporations. It is not a secret society, but it has an agenda, which is contrary to national sovereignty and nationhood. Its president, Richard House, was carefully selected back in 2003 to carry forward the CFR's tradition. Before becoming president of the CFR, Haas was Director of Policy Planning for the United States Department of State. He has also been Vice President and Director of Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institute and Senior Associate at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. A Rhodes Scholar, Haas holds both Masters and Doctor of Philosophy from Oxford University. Many of the members within the CFR are involved in many other organisations and influential positions within government, a revolving door of like-minded globalists, infiltrating all levels of society. Within the organisation, a number of think tanks shape today's international policy. One think tank is known as the David Rockefeller Studies Programme, contributing to the CFR's publication called the Foreign Affairs Journal, which helps shape public opinion towards their future aspirations. In the late 1930s, both the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation promoted the CFR with large monetary contributions. Britain has its own version, known as the Royal Institute of International Affairs, running in step with both the CFR and the Trilateral Commission, diverting foreign policy away from the citizens' ability to control their sovereign destiny towards a secret socialist collective global agenda. We cannot leap into world government through one quick step. The precognition for eventual and genuine globalization is progressive regionalization, because by that we move towards larger, more stable, more cooperative units. Zbigniew Brzezinski, 1995. The Freemasons are not a secret society, but a society with secrets, a large international organization with an estimated 5 million members in nearly every country in the world. It is based on medieval stonemasons' guilds, Old Testament symbolism, ancient Egyptian mystery religions, and the construction of Solomon's Temple. They publicly refer to themselves as morality veiled in allegory. There are many levels within Freemasonry, known as degrees, with the majority falling into the Blue Lodge order. From here, they progress up 3 degrees before splintering off to either the Scottish Rite or York Lodges. The highest known degree is the 33rd degree, which is the Grand Sovereign Inspector General. A significant number of the influential elite within Western society are Freemasons, including politicians, lawyers, barristers and policemen, all looking out for one another as fellow Masons, swearing an oath to secrecy and allegiance. Oblivious to its true purpose, many Freemasons think they are just part of an old boys' network, hoping to further their own personal careers and social status. They lack the understanding of what Freemasonry is built upon. Like all religions, its core belief system is based around astronomy and astrology, which is easily identified by analyzing Masonic rituals and symbols. As the new initiate Freemason progresses up the ladder of degrees within the Masonic fraternity, they are enlightened with ancient knowledge and wisdom, enabling the penny to eventually drop on their level of understanding concerning occult mysteries and holy science. An emphasis is made on the holy sciences, holy meaning holistic or whole. Once you see the whole picture within the science of light, you become illuminated. Man's religions in general do not enlighten the believer. Instead, the truth is twisted, clouding and distorting their view of reality, neutralizing their capacity to have a meaningful influence on human progress. Solomon's Temple plays an important role in Freemasonry, an ancient temple supposedly constructed by King Solomon and his master masons. Headed by a man named Hiram Abiff, the temple was to hold the Ark of the Covenant. There is no archaeological evidence to support the physical existence of this temple, only the account mentioned in the Bible. When we examine the whole concept of Solomon's Temple from an astrological perspective, it all begins to add up. Solomon is a constructed name which refers to the sun in 3 ancient languages. Sol, Latin for the sun. Om means the sun in Sanskrit. On, in biblical Hebrew, Heliopolis, city of the sun, was referred to as On, Sol Amon. The story told by Freemasons is that Hiram Abiff, the master mason during the final stages of constructing Solomon's Temple, was approached by 3 lesser stone workers. They threatened him with death unless he revealed the master mason's secret password. which would grant them wisdom and power. Hiram Abiff refused to divulge the password and was subsequently murdered by the three ruffians. King Solomon later found the body and reburied the remains in an ornate temple. The murderers were eventually executed. The Masons hold Hiram Abiff in great esteem and as an example of honour among master Masons, keeping their oaths and secrets, even to the point of death. The G in the centre of the famous Freemasons' emblem is the highest letter in the zodiac alphabet. It could also be associated with the G in Gemini, its twin pillars, Castor and Pollux, the pillars to Solomon's temple. At each level of Freemasonry, from the 1st degree to the 33rd, the Mason must perform a ritual ceremony and take an oath to keep secret passwords and knowledge within the Brotherhood. The penalty for divulging these secrets can be horrific. At the 33rd degree level, it has been reported that the initiate is asked to drink wine from a human skull, symbolizing Holy Communion with a Masonic twist. The oaths within the Brotherhood of International Freemasonry transcend national and political allegiances, creating a powerful, unaccountable and influential organization throughout the world. As a Mason progresses up the ranks of the fraternal order, his fellow Masons will do all they can to protect him from outside harm. It's a big club, and their oaths are taken seriously, even to the point of protecting fellow members who are involved in criminal activities. In 1826, a Mason by the name of William Morgan aired his intentions to publish a book exposing the Freemasons' secrets. Still under his Masonic oath, he found himself arrested under spurious accusations, later to disappear and was never seen again. The Freemasons were blamed for his death, causing a huge anti-Masonic backlash, which gave them a bad image over the next few decades. Many members left and lodges had to close. Eventually, by the end of the 19th century, their numbers had recovered. Around the time of Albert Pike, any person of renown who was respected in the circles of high society would join the Freemasons. Some researchers have concluded that Jack the Ripper was a Freemason, performing Masonic ritual killings throughout London's Whitechapel during the 1880s. When reviewing their thesis, it does carry some weight. They propose that the second heir to the English throne, the Duke of Clarence, a Freemason, had fallen in love with a common Catholic prostitute, Annie Crooks. He married her and they had a daughter. Annie was set up with a place to live and a nanny to help take care of the baby. The nanny they hired eventually turned to prostitution to increase her income and began spreading the news of the royal secret among other Whitechapel prostitutes. Eventually, some of the prostitutes threatened to expose the story to the press unless they were paid off. At that time, the Prime Minister Robert Cecil was a Freemason. The Police Commissioner Sir Charles Warren was a Freemason, and so was Sir William Gull, the royal physician. It is suggested that either the Queen or the Prime Minister gave the go-ahead to eliminate this threat to the royal establishment's reputation. It is claimed that the royal physician was called upon to neutralize the problem. Gull went on a killing rampage to protect his fellow Masons, who also protected him. The interesting part of this case is the way the victims were murdered. It was as though they were in accordance with Masonic oath penalties. Throat cut from ear to ear and bowels ripped out of the body etc. Prior to being called Jack the Ripper, the killer referred to himself as Leather Apron, just like the item which is given to Master Masons, a lambskin or leather apron. It has been suggested that the reason why Leather Apron was never caught was because he was surrounded and protected by other fellow Masons in high positions. Many influential figures throughout history have been Freemasons, with an allegiance which takes precedence over many other aspects of their lives. Cecil Rhodes was a member of the Bulawayo Lodge in Rhodesia. In 1895, he donated some land over to the order for a construction of a temple. During the Second World War, two of the leaders of the Allied coalition, Churchill and Roosevelt, were Freemasons, brothers united in war and united within international Freemasonry. Germany, on the other hand, in 1934 ordered the disbandment of Freemasonry, the confiscation of its property, and the closure of all its lodges. Masons were seen as a threat to the German National Socialist Revolution. They were prohibited from participating in public service works or having any connections within the National Socialist Party. Freemasons in German concentration camps were regarded as political prisoners and were made to wear red inverted triangles. On August the 8th, 1935, the Führer Adolf Hitler announced a final end to all Masonic lodges throughout Germany. He published an article in a National Socialist Party newspaper accusing the Masonic Order of conspiring with international Jewry to create and control a world republic. As the war progressed, the German ban on Freemasonry applied to all occupied countries as well as nations allied with Germany. To understand Freemasonry, one must go back to the Knights Templar, the Order of Solomon's Temple, a military order officially endorsed by the Roman Catholic Church. Their purpose was to make the Holy Land, from Antioch to Jerusalem, safe for Christian pilgrims. That was their perceived purpose, but beneath it all was an enterprising business aspect. The Catholic Church wanted to control trade routes in this important junction between East and West. The Templars spent 200 years attacking Muslims to secure bases and ports in the Holy Land. To fund these operations, they amassed an immense network of preceptories, communities throughout Europe, involved in all sorts of business ventures to raise revenue for their frontline operations, essentially becoming one of the first multinational corporations. With regular donations and tax exemptions, they became extremely wealthy, allowing them to conduct many crusades. In 1291, they were finally defeated, killed or chased out of the Holy Land by Muslim forces. While they were organizing for another crusade, King Philip IV of France and Pope Clement V arranged for the arrest and disbandment of the Order of the Knights Templars. Philip was heavily in debt to the Templars and saw them as a state within a state, a threat to his authority. The Pope also saw no reason for their existence after their final defeat at the Siege of Acre. He also saw them as a potential threat to his business interests and authority. The Templars, after years of service, were rounded up, tried for heresy, and burnt alive at the stake. Their land and assets were transferred over by the Pope to the Knights Hospitaller, a similar order whose main role was the health and welfare of the pilgrims, a form of medieval Red Cross. The Knights Hospitaller, with all the land and wealth they inherited from the Templars, created a new headquarters in Rhodes and became known as the Knights of Rhodes. They then moved to Malta to become the Knights of Malta. After their defeat to Napoleon and later the British, they eventually moved back to Rome, where they still exist today. Many organizations mirroring the Knights of Malta have sprung up over the years, even adopting the same name, but only one has the endorsement of the Pope. The structure of these orders is very important. Similar to that of the Freemasons, they are a secret order with secret oaths and various levels of hierarchy, with a Grand Master at the helm. They also have ancient pharaonic symbolism, along with pharaonic knowledge and Egyptian deity worship. The Roman Catholic Church was the most dominant business, religious enterprise on the planet, spreading its influence all over the world. This all came to an end in the 16th century with the Reformation and the birth of the Protestant movement, Christians protesting against Catholicism. England broke away, beginning the process under Henry VIII. Later, much of Europe descended into chaos, sparking the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. The war was initially between Protestants and Catholics, but later evolved into basic raw power and control. Many anti-Catholics fled to the New World and the colonies of North America. The Protestant movement, aware of history and how much of a threat the Knights Templar organization became to the Roman Catholic Church, decided to create their own version, a secret order, an army of influential men able to infiltrate society, promoting their beliefs free from papal rule. Using a similar structure as the Templars, they called themselves Freemasons. During this time, much of Europe prohibited Jews from certain occupations. However, they were welcome within Freemasonry due to their opposition towards Catholicism. This new intellectual army was uniting Christians and Jews against Rome. There is a great deal of Jewish symbolism within Freemasonry, and generally a greater ratio of Jews inside lodges as opposed to outside. The Masons and the Catholic Church both drew their underlying principal influences from ancient Egypt. This is why you find obelisks, planets, stars and astrology in both Catholic and Masonic circles. They keep much of the important knowledge at the high levels. Only 1.9% of the founding fathers of America were Catholic. The majority were Protestant. Although these versions of Protestantism had splintered off into different variations, they were still on the other side of Catholicism. Many were also Freemasons. Although they fought the British, who were also Protestant, America was not freeing itself from the Catholic Church just to be enslaved by the Church of England, the Anglican Church, and the corporations of King George III. The Republic was created on similar lines to the old Roman Republic before it was taken over by Julius Caesar using the pharaonic model of supreme figurehead. This revised Republic model became a symbol of new freedom all over the Western world. Many countries were envious. Prior to the French Revolution, Catholicism was the official religion of France. Almost all its 28 million citizens were Roman Catholics. Many scholars believe that the Freemason movement had a role to play in the Revolution, with the intention of destroying the Catholic Church's hold over the country and the Pope's overall influence. King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette, both Roman Catholics, were executed. All churches were closed, public worship was forbidden, and church bells were removed and melted down. By the time Napoleon came to power in 1799, the people were begging for a return of their spiritual institutions. Ready to accommodate religious beliefs, Napoleon restored relations with the Church under his terms, mainly to prevent counter-revolutions and to help promote his rule. On the 16th of July, 1801, he created the Concord Act. Catholicism was to be recognized only as the religion of the majority of the French citizens, denying it any privileges within the state. The Church was also required to give up all claims to property lost during the Revolution, and all clergy were to swear an oath of loyalty to the government. In this new relationship, the Pope had very little authority. Eager to show who was boss, Napoleon insisted the Pope attend his crowning ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral, which made him Emperor Napoleon I. He was not a religious man, but could see the use religion had in controlling the people. He also introduced a feast day for the new Saint Napoleon. Although he restored some of the Catholic Church's prestige, he had disdain for Rome. The Concord Act was introduced in all conquered territories, bringing the Catholic Church throughout Europe firmly under his heel. Napoleon's older brother, Joseph, became the Grand Master of the Grand Orient of France, 1804 to 1815, managing its growth and reputation throughout France. It has never been firmly established whether Napoleon himself was a Freemason, but many believe he was, or at least sympathetic to their cause. The relationship between Napoleon and the Pope was not good. It was a continuous conflict, with the breaking point culminating in 1808, when Napoleon occupied Rome. This immediately led to the Pope's decision to excommunicate him. In retaliation, Napoleon had the Pope arrested and eventually taken to France, where he became Napoleon's prisoner until 1814. The French Revolution was a watershed for Catholicism throughout the whole of Europe, giving the Masons just what they wanted. This could be one reason why Napoleon was not executed after Waterloo. The British and the Masons could not have done a better job on the Catholic Church if they had tried themselves. The Concord Act remained in effect until 1905. The Statue of Liberty, which stands in New York Harbor, proudly symbolizing liberty and freedom, donated by French Grand Orient Temple Masons to Masons of New York in 1884, celebrating 100 years of the first Masonic Republic. The statue is the Roman goddess Libertas, which is the equivalent of the Egyptian goddess Isis. The Catholic Church had to find some way of getting their power and assets back. Business is business, and both sides had a lot to lose. They chose to favour fascist dictatorships over democracies because dictators could get the job done quickly. They worked closely with some of the most ruthless tyrants in history as they moved slowly into position all over Christendom, beginning with Rome. In 1922, a chilly-ratty, freshly appointed cardinal had been the surprising choice to succeed Pope Benedict XV. He took the name Pius XI. Later the same year, amid widespread violence, Benito Mussolini, the 39-year-old fascist leader, became Italy's Prime Minister. Since then, the two men had come to depend on each other. The dictator relied on the Pope to ensure Catholic support for his regime, providing much-needed moral legitimacy. The Pope counted on Mussolini to help him restore the Church's power in Italy. The Pope and Mussolini, David Kurtzer. The Roman Catholic Church had been opposed to Freemasonry since it became a noticeable threat back in 1738, and has made numerous pronouncements forbidding Catholics from becoming Freemasons. In 1983, Joseph Ratzinger issued a Declaration on Masonic Association, which states, "The faithful who enroll in Masonic Association are in a state of grave sin and may not receive Holy Communion. The Church's negative judgment in regard to Masonic associations remains unchanged, since their principles have always been considered irreconcilable with the doctrine of the Church, and therefore membership in them remains forbidden." In 1931, an anti-Catholic Republican government came to power in Spain. They secularized education and prohibited religious education in schools. They also turned over churches' property to the state. This, among other things, helped trigger the Spanish Civil War, a brutal war between the legitimately elected Republican government and nationalist dictator Francisco Franco. The nationalists had a powerful ally, the Catholic Church, and the war was seen by many as a new crusade. We are forced with a war that is taking on each day the character of a crusade. Francisco Franco, 1937. After the war, the close association between Franco's nationalists and the Catholic Church legitimized the dictatorship, which in turn restored the Church's former privileges. South America, predominantly Roman Catholic, was awash with dictators of all kinds of persuasions, all battling for the Catholic Church. Central Europe was also very much Catholic, trying to keep itself together under the growing threat of Masonic Zionist-backed Bolshevism. The Russian Tsar and his family were Eastern Orthodox, which is the closest you will get to Catholicism without the Pope's overriding control. After his downfall and later execution, the Bolsheviks took over with a policy to eradicate all religion, which they intended to implement across Europe. Along with the rise of dictators throughout Europe came a ban on Freemasonry, which was outlawed in fascist Italy, Spain and Germany. The relationship between Catholics and Jews has always been a difficult one. Traditionally, the Catholic Church has been anti anyone who is not Catholic. and so anti-Semitism is a natural progression. It has also had a long history of killing people in the most vile and grotesque ways. The support for Hitler's National Socialist government in Germany was seen as beneficial for the Church's future. Germany could stop the spread of Bolshevism and relocate all Jews out of Europe by placing them in the heart of the Muslim world, forcing the Jews and Muslims together, driving a divisive wedge in the old Crusader states. Hitler was brought up in a Catholic environment. His mother was a devout Roman Catholic. What effect this had on him is not clear, but Hitler himself was not in favour of any organised religion. A Concord Act was signed between the Pope and Germany in 1933, securing the rights of the Church within the Reich. Hitler saw this as the Catholic Church's approval of his regime, which gave him international respectability. He would later renege on this contract by imprisoning both Catholics and Jews in his labour camps. Hitler was fully aware that Germany was surrounded. Freemasons in the west, Bolsheviks in the east, and Roman Catholics in the south. He trusted no one, believing they all wanted to destroy his Reich. From the Church's perspective, they could be seen as just looking after their own business interests, regardless as to what Hitler's intentions were. It is interesting to note that during the last days of World War II, Hitler was rumoured to have escaped into Spain, then Argentina, both Catholic countries. In August 1945, 2 atomic bombs were dropped over Japan, one on Hiroshima and one on Nagasaki, both with a significant Catholic population. The city of Nagasaki was evangelized by Jesuits in 1549 and became an important Catholic centre in the Far East. The Nagasaki bomb fell on the Urakami district, right in the heart of the Catholic area, killing over 35,000 people, including 70% of the 12,000 Catholics who lived there. This was a true Holocaust by definition. Holocaust, destruction or slaughter on a mass scale, especially caused by fire or nuclear war. Incidentally, the new President of the United States, who sanctioned the bomb's use, was a high-ranking Freemason, Harry S. Truman. The official reason for dropping the bomb was questionable because Japan was already in the negotiating stages of surrendering. Truman's allegiance to Freemasonry appears to have superseded his role as president. Although I hold the highest civil honour in the world, I have always regarded my rank and title as a past Grand Master of Masons the greatest honour that had ever come to me. Harry S. Truman. After the war, the Masonic Alliance came away with more power than it went in with. They now had control over most of Europe and still held on to the world's reserve currency. The Americans were looking forward to putting the war behind them and moving forward. In 1961, the first and only Roman Catholic president sat in the White House. His name was John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Many people at the time voiced their concerns over this conflict of interest. By the 1960s, many people considered the Catholic Church and other religious organizations as aging institutions with limited power, and in this new post-war modern world, religious divisions could be overlooked. Kennedy was regarded by many as one of the greatest presidents the United States had ever seen, respected by the people as a progressive, forward-thinking leader. He energized and motivated the nation during his short time in office. Whether his Catholic background had anything other than coincidence to do with his assassination is something most of us will never know. Only those hiding behind national security and official secrets are partial to that information. Bobby Kennedy and JFK Jr. were also Roman Catholics. One thing we can be sure of was Kennedy's opposition to secret oaths and secret societies. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. Vice President Lyndon Johnson, who immediately took over the presidency from Kennedy after his death, was a Freemason. So was J. Edgar Hoover and at least 3 members of the Warren Commission, Chief Justice Earl Warren, Richard Russell, and Gerald Ford. It is also important to point out the number of former US presidents who were also Freemasons. George Washington, Andrew Jackson, James Polk, James Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, James Garfield, William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, William Taft, Warren Harding, Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Lyndon Johnson, and Gerald Ford. The Roman Catholic Kennedys were in the heart of Freemason territory, condemning secret societies, not a good mix if you want to reach retirement age. The economical aspect is also important because the Masons have on their side the world's reserve currency and most of the international banking institutions. It is easy for them to apply financial pressure on adversaries and nonconformers. I personally don't regard the level of poverty in many Catholic countries as a coincidence. The infiltration of both the Masons and the Vatican by one another has been going on for centuries, each side trying to gain the advantage and undermine their opponents' institutions from within. The Vatican, being one of the biggest financial powers, wealth accumulators and property owners in existence, sets itself up as a favourable target for takeover. If any organisation could add this to its portfolio, it could easily control the whole planet. Today, evildoers all seem allied in a tremendous effort inspired by and with the help of a society powerfully organised and widely spread over the world. It is a society of Freemasons. In fact, those people no longer even try to dissimulate their intentions, but they actually challenge each other's audacity in order to assail God's august majesty. It is now publicly and overtly that they undertake to ruin the Holy Church, so as to succeed, if it is possible, in the complete dispossession of Christian nations of all the gifts they owe to our Saviour Jesus Christ. As a result, in the space of a century and a half, the sect of the Freemasons has made incredible progress, making use at the same time of audacity and cunning. Masonry has invaded all the ranks of social hierarchy, and in the modern states it has begun to seize a power which is almost equivalent to sovereignty. Pope Leo XIII, April 1884. Let us remember that Christianity and Freemasonry are essentially incompatible to such an extent that to become united with one means being divorced from the other. Let us therefore expose Freemasonry as the enemy of God, of the Church, and of our motherland. Pope Leo XIII, December 1892. It has been suspected that Freemasons have infested the Catholic Church, especially during the post-World War II era. There have been many articles and accounts written about Masonic infiltration, even suspecting them of being involved in the death of Pope John Paul I in 1978. The new Pope was only 33 days into his new role when he was found dead in his bed, suspected of having a heart attack. In David Yellop's book, In God's Name, he identifies a link between Freemasons within the Vatican and the death or murder of the new Pope. These Freemasons in the Vatican are known as P2 Propaganda Due, the Grand Orient Masonic Lodge of Italy, founded in 1805 during the Napoleonic Kingdom of Italy. Interestingly, one of the P2 Masons suspected of being involved, Gian Roberto Calvini, was also the Vatican's banker, later found hanging from scaffolding under Blackfriars Bridge in London's banking district in June 1982. If Masons have infested the Vatican to a point at which it is no longer independent, their ability to oppose the spread of Masonic power and its version of globalisation has finally been neutralised. As a result, the Roman Catholic Church has opened its doors to paedophiles, homosexuals and women priests, internal division which most likely would have been resisted before. The Masonic takeover could explain Tony Blair's recent conversion to Catholicism. He is now on safe territory. And it's also beneficial to his public relations campaign when seeking the job of Master of the Universe. His new Catholic status could bring him 2 billion new supporters. Ever since I began preparations to become a Catholic, I felt I was coming home. This is now where my heart is, where I now belong. Tony B. Lyer.